Welcome to Week 10 of the President's Athletic Conference Football Focus. I'm Waynesburg University senior Andy Stanko, and this week our focus shifts to the Waynesburg University Yellow Jackets. Each week, the PAC Football Focus features one team from around the conference. We'll take a look into the program and highlight Saturday's matchups to get you ready for the weekend with the PAC Pregame Show following the Football Focus. Another Waynesburg University student and I will break down every matchup involving PAC teams in Week 10. Coach Rick Shepas has been the head coach of Waynesburg University football since 2005. Since then, the Jackets have finished as one of the top 3 teams in the conference 7 different times in his 11 seasons. Waynesburg claimed a share of the PAC title in 2012 when the Yellow Jackets won 10 games, the second most in school history. Waynesburg finished 2015 with a 3-7 record and enters Week 10 of the 2016 season 2-6. For Coach Shepas, it's been a year to reestablish the foundation for Yellow Jacket football.
It means that, you go through a period of time, and I think every program goes through this. I think, this year you see Michigan State having that issue now where you have a foundation of players who were significant in the growth and development of success. And then through graduation, you have things lost in translation. So, what that means is to reestablish all the things that are important to our program and how we conduct every facet of what we're doing. So it's about our mental approach to everything we're doing, how we train, the importance of the off season and spring practice for preparation, the team building in the fall, attention to detail, and then every bit of the structure of how we do things.
In addition to reestablishing the foundation for the program, Coach Shepas points to an emphasis in recruiting being a key to bringing the program back to the forefront in the PAC.
Through our good years, we were able to successfully recruit good athletes who were all high academic achieving guys. We need to start the year, with 25 minimum 25 offensive linemen, minimum 20 defensive linemen. You know what I mean? A linebacking core of 16 to 20. You know what I mean? A secondary of minimum 20. You know what I mean? Receiving core minimum of 20. You know what I'm saying? Tight ends of 8 to 10, true tight ends that are varying size and, speed range. You know what I mean? So reestablishing that is not that we haven't stopped putting the effort forward to do that, but we got to make sure that we're accomplishing those things.
The 2016 Waynesburg University football team features freshmen at virtually every position group, including quarterback. An injury to sophomore Jake Doherty in Week 3 of the season altered the trajectory of the year, with last year's starting quarterback going down, in addition to adding so many new faces for the Orange and Black.
All that did was put us back at zero. I mean, we even at the start of the year, we weren't firing on all cylinders. You know what I mean? And part of that is because of the influx of a lot of new players into the program, so, there's also something to be said for me doing a better job with managing expectations, the goals, realistic goals and expectations of incoming freshmen, to create more focus and less distraction amongst that. That would be, as I close the year, that would be one thing that I think has plagued us and something that, we've tried to manage throughout the course of the year. You know what I mean? So in other words, get the focus where the focus needs to be. You know what I mean? On the individual athlete, hey, this is where you're at. This is where you need to improve.
Coach Shepas stresses team-first attitudes because that's what's made the Jackets so successful in previous seasons.
Focus on team instead of self. In today's day and age, hard to do. When everything is focused on individual self. I mean, if you pay attention to even every major college coach and how they're speaking about their teams, the teams that are having success, I mean, the overriding factor, even at the NFL level, you heard Carr say it about the Raiders, the things that make their team different are the way they care about each other. They love each other, they care about each other in the locker room, and they're fighting for each other. You follow me? That is the mark of any consistently good program. You know what I mean? So, that's what we had. It's the reason why we had such a good run for about 5 or so years. You know what I mean? Where we had, where we were in contention and we knew we were going to compete for, a conference championship and postseason.
Many underclassmen see the field for the Yellow Jackets in 2016. There is a learning curve to overcome, but some talented freshmen bring physical tools that allow them to contribute right away.
By keeping a level head and being talented. Sometimes talent talent just overrides the veteran player, which in this case, we needed speed to stretch the field. You speak of a guy like a TJ Johnson right out of the gate. We needed his speed on the field to complement, Cooper and Kevin Barnes in the offensive sets. Youth is a detriment. We've seen that at the running back position, just lack of understanding. And we're young at some key spots, and it's shown in lack of execution, point production, all those things. We're starting to overcome some of those things. But sometimes your schedule just doesn't permit you to do that. In this case, and this is always going to be something that matters here in our place. You got to win your week 1 game. Whether even if it's an illusion and it didn't go well, like an ugly win, you have to win in week 1.
The strength of the 2016 Yellow Jacket football team has been its defense. It's Coach Shepas' philosophy to put the team's best players on that side of the ball.
We've always done that. And last year was a reason why we needed to do more of that, right? Because we weren't. I mean, the scores were reflective of just poor defense, poor tackling, all those other things. Now we've added tackling circuits and to twice a week in practice, both in the kick game and on the defensive side of the ball. And you want to play your best there because you got to stop opponents, right? You got to keep people down. So that's why they would take that role, and they should. It should be a byproduct of us putting, the best guys over there. Offensively, you hope to get some of your leadership out of the quarterback position. When your quarterbacks are young, it's hard to learn and lead.
The Waynesburg offense has struggled to put points on the board and entered last week with the lowest scoring offense in the PAC. The Jackets put up a season-high 42 points in a loss to Teal, but things finally started to pick up on that side of the ball.
We've been simplifying all year. We've been asking for hat on hat. I think they just listened to us and did what they were told to do more than anything else. And then when we sputtered in the game, I refer to it, we had a great 3 quarters. Fourth quarter, we reverted back into some bad habits, and then we got the result in the fourth quarter. Defense has held for us all year. Last Saturday was an opportunity for the offense to score more points than they did in that circumstance. So. After evaluating the film the way we looked at it, there were some point conversions where 7 points were necessary when we get 3, which aided to Teal's momentum, I think, in staying in the game. So at 39-30, when we missed that pass to Alec Watts in the end zone, that makes it 46-30. To me, is the game-changing situation. And then, not to mention that, we go, we're kicking field goals instead of scoring touchdowns when we had touchdown opportunities that we just didn't capitalize on. So I told the guys on the sideline, I said, hey, let's just score more. No big deal. We're clicking. We had some things really working for us too. When our offense works, we can use the whole playbook. So we used more playbook Saturday in one game Saturday than we have used in the previous games combined.
The Jackets match up this week with St. Vincent College. The Bearcats feature the conference's leading passer, Derek Stewart. The Jackets hope to bounce back after allowing a season-high 50 points to Teal.
Okay, they're going to beat you with the pass. Let them beat you with the pass, but don't let them beat you with run and pass. They started to mix on us, which means we lost our way a little bit. We lost, and sometimes you could lose that, and that needs to be evaluated because sometimes you could lose that on the field where you just lose confidence and then momentum just, That's why it's so important for the offense to play off you. Hopefully the exposure, to Radke, which we knew Radke was going to be trouble with his receivers end of it. Hopefully, the evaluation of that film will help us in this game defensively. And then, try to maintain the offensive performance, that we had, at least conceptually.
Finally, while it is a reestablishment of foundation year for Waynesburg, Coach Shepas sees light at the end of the tunnel, but also some unanswered questions.
The future of this thing is really bright, at the skill positions. Our trouble spots more than anything else it's depth, but then it's offensive line and linebacking core heading into the future here. We've made the decision. We've tried to push buttons of older guys to get more out of them, get them to fight for some things. If they don't, then we're playing the younger guys. We'll continue to do all that stuff.
Thanks to Rick Shepas and Waynesburg University for being on the PAC Football Focus. Up next week is Case Western Reserve and head coach Greg Debeljak. Stay tuned for the PAC Pregame Show coming up next on pacathletics.org.
I'm Joe Enderko, Commissioner of the President's Athletic Conference. Want to know what makes the PAC so special? Here's a few reasons why.
Comprised of 10 private institutions and 2 affiliate members, the PAC remains unique in this era of high-pressure college athletics. Now sponsoring 21 sports as it celebrates over 60 years of competition, the PAC is regarded as one of the elite NCAA Division III conferences in the nation. Our student athletes excel in athletics as well as the classroom, with numerous postgraduate scholarship winners, over 150 academic All-Americans, and over 900 academic honorable recipients with a 3.6 GPA or higher in the past year alone. Want to learn more? Visit us at www.pacathletics.org or follow the President's Athletic Conference on social media.
Academic and athletic excellence since 1955, the President's Athletic Conference.
Welcome to the pregame show here on PACathletics.org. Andy Stanko with you, and joining me this week is fellow Waynesburg University senior Brendan Keany. And Brendan, before we get into a full slate of week number 10 games, we'll take a look back at week 9 when you had your typical PAC action. Case playing against Washington in a UAA matchup. What jumped out? React to week 9.
I think the fact that Carnegie Mellon defeated Westminster by 2 scores at Carnegie Mellon was huge, and I think that shows a lot about the direction that the Tartans are heading at this moment. I think the win certainly puts them in that top echelon of teams, and we've talked about this a lot this season, Andy, in that Carnegie Mellon really had a chance to be undefeated. You know, losing an overtime game, W&J, losing the first game of the season in overtime as well, a game that a lot of things had to go wrong for them to lose. And then, of course, a 4-point loss to Thomas More. Carnegie Mellon is a very solid team, and, you know, I'm really looking forward to next week. I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but, you know, they play Case Western in Case Western, and that could be a huge game for determining who wins this conference championship.
Yeah, you look at CMU, and those losses to W&J as well as Thomas More both came on the road, able to get it done in Pittsburgh. And for Westminster, they are now the 4th straight team not called Thomas More to beat W&J and lose in the next 2 weeks immediately thereafter. So a lot of times you have that high, Case Western, Waynesburg, Bethany, and now Westminster all fall in the 2 weeks afterwards. I do want to hit on the Teal-Waynesburg game. That one being high scoring was a big surprise to me considering what Waynesburg does, which is play defense this year, and 42 points, far and away a season high for the Jackets. An excellent game. Ryan Radke, an outstanding performance. Otherwise, your winners, W&J and Thomas More, no surprises there. St. Vincent, a tough stretch, 0-4 after starting off 4-0. And then Geneva over Grove City, a close one in Beaver Falls at Reeves Field under the lights. But let's get into our first matchup. This one, a 1 o'clock kick in Chicago. It's one of those UAA matchups. Carnegie Mellon University travels to take on the Maroons of Chicago. CMU 5-3, 5-2 in the PAC. University of Chicago 4-4, 4-3 in the Southern Athletic Association. Last season, CMU beat Chicago 52-7. The Tartans put up over 560 yards of total offense. Andrew Herron was spectacular in that game. 13 for 16 passing, 261 yards, 4 touchdowns through the air. Sam Benger, 23 carries, 207 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. And Case and CMU play Chicago and Washington. Case already played Chicago and won that game 45-17 in week 1. However, this Chicago team won last week against Sewanee 49-30, a season high in points, and quarterback Burke Moser passed for 558 yards, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Chicago ran the ball 7 times for negative 15 yards, so you could say things were one-dimensional, but the passing game really worked last week for Chicago. But CMU will win over Westminster, 35-23. That's a great win for the Tartans. CMU's been right there, as you mentioned, Brendan, with W&J and Thomas More. A win over Westminster, a win over Case Western to close out the season are the next best things. And 35 points on that Westminster defense is no joke. Alex Klein, 216 yards passing, 4 touchdowns without a pick against one of the best pass defenses in the PAC. And then Sam Benger ran for 145 yards, a touchdown, caught a touchdown. And last year, Westminster was the only team to hold Sam Benger under 100 yards. Not this time around. They got it done. So CMU, a team that's rolling, a team that started 2-3 and now is 5-3, still looking for that postseason bowl bid.
Yeah, a couple of things jump out at me with this win over Westminster this past week. And first of all is that I don't see CMU as being that one-dimensional running team that we've seen them be in the past. And that's relying on Sam Benger. You mentioned his stats. He had another game where he had 145 yards. He ran the ball for 25 times. But one thing you do have to know is that one of his runs was 53 yards. And so that drops it down to 24 carries for less than 100 yards for Sam Benger. So Westminster took care of Sam Benger as much as you really can because he's
for 3 quarters.
Yeah,
that run came in the fourth quarter to really put the game out of reach.
Exactly. So other than that one run, Westminster really took care of Sam Benger as much as any team can. But one thing I do want to mention is that Alex Klein has been playing efficient football. 20 of 36 for 216 yards, 4 touchdowns, and then, of course, the most important statistic, 0 interceptions for Klein, and he's spreading out the ball rather nicely. Tommy Mansfield picked up a nice day, 9 receptions, 125 yards, and a touchdown, and then John Prather having a really solid season, 6 receptions, 53 yards, and 2 touchdowns for him. And then another thing I want to mention is they really did a solid job on defense. They kind of shut down Dominique McKinley, who only gained 46 yards on 13 carries. He did have a touchdown, but they held him to under that 4 yards per carry average. And then they really shut down Paul Colombo, who had one of his worst performances of the season, 9 of 21 for 93 yards and an interception through the air. And then he only was able to pick up 15 yards on 7 carries. So definitely not the numbers that Paul Colombo was capable of. And so to kind of hold those stars down was really good for Carnegie Mellon. So they're getting it done. They're spreading the ball out on offense and, executing on defense.
Yeah, for CMU against Westminster, 3 for 3 in the red zone, all touchdowns. Big plays, a 41-yard touchdown pass to Mansfield, as you mentioned, Brendan. Mansfield, a career day, 9 for 125. Benger, the 53-yard touchdown run, that coming in the fourth quarter. So it all really came together for CMU, and the thing about the Tartans is they really can. And this is, we talked to Coach Benzel last week of Westminster, and he said they can play any style, a shootout with W&J, a clock-draining, low-scoring game against Thomas More. The Tartans flat-out outplayed Westminster last week. And that is something you're really happy to see if you're Coach Lackner, and your best players have been consistent all year. Brian Corey, PAC Defensive Player of the Week, 2.5 sacks, his 4th game this season with at least 2 sacks. The CMU defense, a pair of interceptions, including 1 in the red zone. CMU hadn't had an interception in any of the last 4 weeks, and they got it done on that side of the ball in one of the biggest games of the season. And I also, when I talked to Coach Lackner and asked him about a position group that is sort of unheralded, he mentioned his receivers. And you look at the last couple of weeks, 2 weeks ago was Matt Forgin, 7 catches, 139 yards, a touchdown. Last week it was Mansfield. Against W&J 4 weeks ago it was John Prather, 177 and a touchdown. 4 weeks, 4 different leading receivers for Carnegie Mellon University, along with one of the best running backs you have in the country. I think having that sort of balance is outstanding. John Prather, look out, he needs 5 catches to set a single-season receptions record at CMU with 51. Under 100 yards away to move into second all-time in receiving yards as a Tartan. I think it's really impressive, the career that he's put together. You mentioned the season he was having. He's one of those top 3 guys in the PAC in terms of yards per game. He's around those guys who have 100 yards, and there are only so many of them. And for Chicago, look out, Burke Moser, top passer in the SAA, 357 yards a game through the air, 24 touchdowns. Dante Nepa, 5th leading receiver in the SAA, 85 yards a game, 8 touchdowns in the season. However, Chicago, dead last in terms of rushing, 103 yards, under 4 yards a carry. Chicago defense, last in total defense, allowing over 500 yards of offense per game. Second to last in scoring defense, giving up 35 points per game. Chicago wants to go up and down the field. In wins, the Maroons have scored 35, 38, 33, and 49 points. In losses, Chicago scored 17, 27, 21, and 28 points. The magic number Chicago has to score is 30. CMU, I think they're going to get there anyway. And you look at the standings in the UAA, Case 2-0, Washington 1-1, Chicago and CMU both 0-1 up to this point. But we'll move on. Next matchup coming in week number 10. It's Case Western Reserve traveling to Westminster, Spartans and Titans, and these teams have not played each other since Case has entered the PAC. It would have been a fascinating matchup last season, with what ended up being a 9-win Westminster team and a Case squad that started 6-0 in PAC play. Case once again 6-0 to start the season, 8-0 overall, number 24 in the country. But if both Case and Thomas More went out, it's likely that Thomas More would earn the automatic bid by virtue of the tiebreaker being, quote, strength of conference wins. Conference winning percentage of teams you beat in 8 PAC games. Quote, Thomas More has a win over W&J that Case wouldn't have. Case would have a win over Geneva in the final week of the season that Thomas More wouldn't have. W&J better record than Geneva. Bid would go to Thomas More. That assumes both teams winning out. Case still has at Westminster versus CMU in the last 2 weeks, so my opinion, toughest games on the schedule. It's not a given yet, and for Westminster, a loss at CMU, a week after beating W&J. CMU just made the plays in Westminster, held to a field goal on the first drive. Westminster got inside the red zone. CMU got a touchdown on the next drive. Westminster takes a 10-7 lead with a score. Next drive for CMU, a targeting penalty removes Gator Phillips for the first half, gives CMU 15 yards. CMU ends up scoring again. Tartan scored on another long touchdown pass of 41 yards. Westminster throws a red zone interception in the end zone. Westminster misses a field goal to end the half when Justin Dahl's one of the best kickers in the PAC, and all said and done, it's 21-10 CMU, and really, Tartans outplay the Titans in the first half. And then second half, it starts exactly how you want it for Westminster. Defense gets a stop, offense goes down and scores, 2-point conversion, no good. It's only 21-16, Colombo knocked out on that drive, but after the touchdown, unsportsmanlike penalty on Westminster, CMU gets 15 yards on the kickoff, start from the CMU 46, go down and get 6, and from there, Westminster doesn't get any closer. So Titans, we love the passion in which they play with. I think it shot them in the foot against CMU, and Case put up 700 yards against a good Washington team. Case offensive line is your D3Football.com Team of the Week offensive line. Team ran for 435 yards, too shy of the program rushing record. So Rob Kuda, another outstanding week, 191 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns through the air with no turnovers. Brendan Keany, Case Western, Westminster.
Well, to me, this is probably the most intriguing matchup of the entire week, and it's because Case Western is a team that, as you mentioned, is undefeated. They're looking to try to win that PAC championship. A lot of things have to go their way in order for that to happen, but the bottom line is that they're in the position, and Westminster is an extremely solid team, and they're kind of built with their defense. The defense didn't really show up last week against CMU. They held the Tartans to under 400 yards, but they weren't able to match the efficiency that CMU was able to move the ball. And they're going to have to figure it out on offense if they want to beat Case Western. Case Western is a team that scores points. I mean, that's just you're going to have to score. You're going to have to play with them. Case Western averages 40.7 points a game. And so you're going to have to at least get, maybe not as many because Westminster's defense is very good, but you're going to have to at least probably score 30 to 35 points if you want to hang with this team. And if you're Paul Colombo, you have to rebound from a fairly pedestrian performance last week. I went over his stats earlier. Once again, 9 of 21 for 93 yards and a touchdown, and then not really a factor in the run game either, only netting 15 yards with his legs. So that's something to keep in mind if you're Westminster. And Westminster still has a lot to play for. They're still, considered to be one of the best teams in this league, of course, with a win against W&J just last week. They're one of the premier defenses in the whole conference. But as for Case Western, there's not much to not like about how they do things. Rob Kuda, he's not that superstar who's going to just throw up numbers this year because he doesn't need to be. They're getting the more rushers involved. Jacob Burke had another tremendous game, 26 rushes for 164 yards, 3 more touchdowns to add to his resume on this. It's been a fine season for him. But as you said, Andy, Rob Kuda, tremendous on the ground. Passing, he was just as good. And the big thing about Rob Kuda is that he very seldom makes a mistake. No interceptions again last week to go with 3 touchdowns. When Rob Kuda is moving the ball with his arm and his legs, and Jacob Burke is carving up defenses over 6 yards per carry again last week against Washington, it's a very tough team to stop, even if you are a good defense like Westminster. But Case cannot overlook this game. Westminster is a very solid team.
Case Western against Washington, 12 possessions, 8 touchdowns, 40 minutes of possession, dominating really start to finish. And I'd say the turning point of the game, Washington trailed 21-7. Washington got the touchdown to cut it to 21-14. The Bears went for an onside kick, got the kick, and then went 3 and out. Case scores. The game never really gets closer than that. Washington 3 and out. Case turnover on downs. Washington 3 and out. Case goes 80 yards in 12 plays. All of a sudden it's 35-14. It never gets closer than a double-digit lead. And Case defensively, I'll say this. I think the jury is still out on this Spartan defense. Washington's a really good passing team. They passed for 382 yards, 4 touchdowns, and interception. Ran for 144 yards and 5.5 yards a carry. Case has the number 1 scoring and total offense in the PAC. I think this defense has been relatively untested. They've been dominant against, young quarterbacks, first-year quarterbacks.
Haven't had to play Thomas More, W&J.
And so I think we will find out, especially against CMU in that last week of the season, as you referenced, Brendan. And for Westminster defensively, 2 losses, giving up 45 and 35 points respectively. The offense also left 11 points on the board. Westminster wasn't outclassed, just outplayed. I still think they're a top 2, top 3 defense in the conference. They've got to prove it. I am concerned with Colombo. Evan Redding finished the game, threw 16 passes, 123 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Colombo's been hurt before. This team won with Shaman Walker last year against both Teal and Waynesburg. Unfortunately, he's not playing 2015 Teal or Waynesburg. He's playing Case Western Reserve. And in order to beat Case, you must score at least 30 points. Westminster's offense is good enough to do so. Coach Benzel thinks the offense is capable to play in a shootout. However, I'm not too sure with a different quarterback. In Case, Geneva's offense able to slow them down. Jacob Burke limited to 49 yards. I think this Westminster defense is in that Geneva area, if not a little bit better. So I think I agree with you, Brendan. Perhaps the most compelling game in the PAC, if not Bethany and Grove City, perhaps. 2 teams looking to get their first conference win. Let's move on to Washington, Pennsylvania. For Geneva traveling to W&J. Geneva 3-5, 2-4. W&J 6-2, 4-2 in conference play. And last season, W&J beat Geneva on Halloween night at Reeves Field in a game that was close through the entire first half. W&J only led Geneva 13-10 with a field goal with 5 seconds in the second quarter to take that lead. However, the second half was all W&J. Presidents outscored Geneva 21-3. Pete Coughlin, a pair of touchdown passes of at least 61 yards, Coughlin 18 for 26, 346, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. However, we say this every week. Geneva's a very different team this year. It's funny to see Javid Ellis passing 22 times on the box score last year. Trayvon Marshall, 5 catches for 16 yards last year. Now he's a force running the football. W&J strong second half to pull away from St. Vincent. 48-26 last week. W&J in the last month, close win over CMU. Bethany lost at Westminster. And against St. Vincent, it's 27-26 Presidents at the half. And you think, oh boy, here comes another game. However, Presidents in the second half, 21-0 over St. Vincent to secure the win. And to the surprise of no one in particular, Coughlin to Zubik was the combination to really put the game away. 2 scores in the second half. W&J's offense, touchdowns on each of the first 3 drives. The Presidents had the ball, which was a good thing since St. Vincent scored on each of its first 2 possessions. Had another stretch of 3 straight scores to end the third and start the fourth quarter. Geneva escaped at Grove City College 21-14. Grove City tied the game at 14 with 3:39 left in the fourth. Geneva on the next drive got a 66-yard run by Nick Monteleone to set up a 13-yard touchdown run by Trey Marshall. And Geneva outgained Grove City 410 to 275, rushed for 345 yards, 6.5 yards per carry, 4 different guys with at least 67 yards. Brian Stafford, the quarterback, 6 for 9, 65 yards, and interception. Geneva's defense tipped the cap for being outstanding again. Not really outside the realm of possibility for Geneva to be a 5 or 6 win team if a few plays change here or there. So Brendan Keany, Geneva, W&J, what's the matchup?
Well, I think one thing you have to look at is Geneva controlling the clock. If we all know Geneva's defense is extremely solid. They're definitely, at the very least, they're in the top half of the conference, and they can be downright scary at times. And part of that is because of their tendency to get turnovers. They 3 interceptions last week against Grove City, and that was huge for them. They really held Brett LaFoon down despite giving up the two passing touchdowns. But it was only a one-score game against Grove City. I don't really look at this game as a one-score game. Geneva really held the ball. And then you look on offense. You mentioned some of the numbers earlier, but there were 4 guys for Geneva that netted over 60 yards rushing. And the way they're doing it is they're starting to hit some of those home run plays again. Khalil Character, 47-yard run. He had 67 yards on 4 carries. Monteleone, you mentioned, a 66-yard run. Marshall had 82 yards total, one of them being a 17-yard run. And then Brian Stafford, he had 19 carries for 87 yards, one of them being 33 yards. So if they can start hitting some of those home run plays, which is kind of inconsistent for them. They like to be that 3-3-4 team that just keeps methodically moving the ball down the field. But I think against a team like W&J, they're going to need to go for some of the home runs because we know that W&J has the ability and really the tendency to throw up a ton of yards. As for W&J, I was a little bit surprised at this game. Yes, the score, they dominated, if you're just looking at the scoreboard, 48-26, so a 22-point victory for them. This is a very rare game in which W&J is outgained in total yards. Derek Stewart had a phenomenal game against them, and that's not really a good comparison for what Geneva brings to the table, a team that only passes about 3 to 7-ish times a game. So that's going to be very difficult for Geneva. They're going to have to be able to match the offensive firepower that W&J brings. But as you mentioned, if Pete Coughlin plays a game that he played against St. Vincent, it could be a long day for Geneva because he was essentially perfect. Passing 15 of 20, which no complaints, especially with no interceptions, 189 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground. He was a force, the leading rusher actually on the team with 126 yards and a touchdown. One of his runs going for 17 yards. And so when Pete Coughlin plays in this fashion, he can be the best player in the PAC on a week-to-week basis. The consistency isn't always there, but against Geneva, it's definitely going to be, can Geneva control the ball and control the clock? They're probably going to have to force a couple turnovers, which they're capable of doing. Can they hit some of the home run plays, and can they bend and not break on defense? That's what I'm looking for.
Brendan, I really liked your point about the burst plays or the big plays for Geneva. 2 of their touchdown drives came in bursts, one being 3 plays, 83 yards, the other being 6 plays, 89 yards. The drive for 83 yards, of course, had the 66-yard run. The drive for 89 yards had runs of 33 and 47 yards. The first scoring drive was long, 9 plays, 80 yards, 5 first downs, that Geneva right down the field. However, the Golden Tornadoes didn't face a single third down on any of those scoring drives, only 2 for 8 on the day. So you see a Geneva offense that's sort of limited right now. If they don't get those chunk plays, they're not going to go very far. But they limited turnovers, only an interception on the first drive of the game, only 2, and then a fumble in Geneva's own red zone with 20 seconds left in the first half. And kudos to the Geneva defense, went out and intercepted LaFoon in the end zone, and then after the interception thrown by Geneva, Grove City College drove inside the Geneva 20 and missed a field goal. So that's twice that the defense picked up the offense after a sudden change. So tip the cap to them again. And Tim Martin, John Fiskus, Jimmy Quinlan, all 10 tackles. Those guys, we say those names every week. They're cruising on their way towards all PAC teams. And for Geneva, it's really interesting. That triple option offense will keep you in a lot of games. They're last in total offense, but first in total defense. That's by design. They play the lowest scoring games in the PAC, 18 points per game for, 19 points per game against. That keeps you in a lot of games. Against the top offenses, Case Western, just 16 points. Turnovers really helped St. Vincent reach 28 points. Geneva able to outscore Teal 35-27. We'll see. W&J specifically has Coughlin to Zubik as the connection, and if you can stifle that, you have a chance. We shall see, and we shall move on to our next matchups. Thomas More traveling to Greenville, PA, with the season finale for the Saints. Thomas More ranked to number 14 in the country. 7-1, 6-0 in conference play. Teal 3-5, 2-4 in PAC competition. Last year, Thomas More beat Teal 60-12. led the game 45-0, outgained Teal 568 to 245, so more than doubled up the Tomcats. And it was Jensen Gebhardt passing for 320 yards, 4 touchdowns, and Goose Cohorn, 10 receptions, 216 yards, 2 touchdowns. Chris Torrance, 121 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Thomas More will clinch a share of the PAC title with a win on Saturday, likely would win the conference by virtue of the relevant tiebreaker and win over W&J that Case Western would lack. Case Western still needs to win out. And Coach Scaife, yet to lose a conference matchup, an excellent year number 2 for him at Thomas More. Teal winners on last Saturday night, beating Waynesburg 50-42 in one of the better games you'll see in the PAC this year. Waynesburg's defense has been the strength of the team, but Ryan Radke, your PAC Offensive Player of the Week, passing for 391 yards, 3 touchdowns, rushing for another 163 yards and 3 touchdowns. He became Teal's all-time leading passer in the game, threw fourth-quarter touchdowns of 44 and 43 yards to take a 1-point lead and extend the game to an 8-point difference. And Teal defensively allowed Waynesburg's offense that hadn't scored more than 23 points in a single game score a season-high 42 points. And Teal has allowed Waynesburg, Bethany, and Geneva to all score season-high in total of points, and they're all bottom 4 offenses in the PAC in terms of scoring offense. So Teal certainly looking to shore up that defensively. And then Thomas More on the other side, winners over Bethany last week, 30-7 down in Crestview Hills, Kentucky. Thomas More defense, another strong performance. Bethany, only 242 yards, under 4 yards per play. 2 takeaways for the Saints. Bethany 4 for 16 on third down. And for the Bison, the only scoring drive came on the final drive in the game for Bethany late in the fourth quarter. There's 88 of your 242 yards for Bethany and all 7 points. Trey Tunstill led the effort defensively, 13 tackles, 2 for loss in this game. So I actually talked to Ryan Radke after the game in Teal, and he said, one of the first things he said, it was really good to play this game against Waynesburg before you play Thomas More because you have to be ready because they're one of the best teams in the country, and it's a tall task for Teal this week.
Oh, absolutely. And here's the thing, though. I would have said to Ryan Radke, throw up another game like you just played tonight, and you can keep your team in it. You mentioned the gaudy numbers that he put up against Waynesburg, and he has the ability to do that on a week-to-week basis. Nick Barca also ran for 55 yards and a touchdown, and he got a ton of help. Deshaun Bracey, 8 receptions, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's an incredible day for Deshaun Bracey. So,
who's a freshman, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, so Teal has a lot of solid pieces in place for this game against Thomas More, though. The defense needs to improve. You mentioned that Geneva, Bethany, and Waynesburg all having their season performances against Teal, and that's a really tough pill to swallow if you're the Tomcats because Waynesburg had the game high that they had, the season high in points was 23, and then they put up a
29
ton of points
in the first half.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and you also have to. It was 39-30 Waynesburg in the third quarter against Teal. So Waynesburg looked like they could have pulled out a win against the Tomcats, but Ryan Radke was able to pull his team together and prevail. But they can't, and this is where it gets tough because Teal went out and they had a great game. They started the season off pretty hot. I'm going to take us back through the first couple games of the season. 44-21 against Allegheny. That's great. And then only lost by 2 the following week to St. Vincent, which is a solid team in the PAC. And here's where it gets a little strange, though. 57-47 against a Bethany offense that can be downright anemic at times. Bethany was able to put up good points. Keenman had one of his better days on the season. And then, but what happened a couple weeks later when they played a very good W&J team, 62-14, the Tomcats fell. And that came after a tough loss to Geneva. So when the defense plays tough against Geneva's offense, it's really difficult for them to match, especially a team like W&J. that can go out there and pretty much put points on the board every time they have a possession. And Thomas More is that team that can go up there and put points almost every time that they have a possession. This is going to be a very tall order for Teal. I really like the way Thomas More has been playing. You know, they have another great shot to win the President's Athletic Conference. C.T. Tarrant had a tremendous day on the ground, 152 yards on 20 carries and 2 touchdowns for the Saints. Brennan Kuntz, no interceptions, which is a huge key for a guy who, relies a lot on the run game. 16 to 29, 205 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was sacked 5 times, which is fairly alarming.
Well, that's what Bethany does defensively. They're one of the top teams in terms of getting to opposing quarterbacks, but that's alarming. 3 fumbles in 1 quarter that you lose is also alarming for Thomas More.
But Thomas More, once again, spreading the ball out on offense. Dalen Garland had another great day. He's established himself as one of the better receivers in the PAC. 7 receptions, 82 yards, and a TD. Logan Winkler had a solid performance. He has some big play capability, a 40-yard reception and a touchdown. So this Thomas More team has weapons all over the place on both sides of the ball. They're easily the most complete team, I would say, in the PAC.
Yes.
Them and Case Western can kind of battle that out a little bit. Unfortunately, we don't get to see that matchup this year. But it's going to be a tough task for Teal. Ryan Radke has the capability to keep his team in the game, but it's the defense that I'm concerned about for the Tomcats.
Well, Ryan Radke and his team were in this game 2 years ago when Radke set the single-season total yardage record for Teal College, a record that he's on pace to break this season. Teal led Thomas More 27-21 at the half 2 years ago. However, Thomas More outscored the Tomcats 45-0 in the second half to win it 66-27. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite games to look back on. And really, for this Teal defense, you mentioned the fact that they give up a lot of yards and points. I'll give them some credit, though, against Waynesburg. When they were trailing 36-24, they held Waynesburg to a 20-yard field goal, a 30-yard field goal, and an interception in the end zone when the defense really needed to have stops against a Waynesburg team that put up over 500 yards of total offense. I want to give a lot of credit to Tyron Bynum and Jake Elk. Bynum, 11 tackles, a sack, forced an intentional grounding at a critical juncture in the game at a 3rd and 8 from the Teal 10-yard line in the final 4 minutes, and Jake Elk, 10 tackles, half a sack. Those linebackers are very good for Coach Bloom down in Teal. And finally, for Thomas More and Coach Scaife, this is really our last chance to talk about the team. They've been so good this season. Last year, they were number 11 in the country. They had so many seniors graduate. They're right there, number 14 this year. They're a team this conference can be proud of. They played a tougher non-conference game than anyone else at Franklin. And here they are again with a top 3 offense, top 3 defense, number 1 in running the ball, stopping the run. It's been another great season for Thomas More, and congratulations on what they've been able to accomplish thus far. But that one, Greenville, PA, 1 o'clock kickoff. We'll see if Ryan Radke and company can pull it off. Next matchup, however, we'll head to Bethany, West Virginia, with Grove City College traveling to Bethany to take on the Bison. These are 2 teams, the longest losing streaks in the PAC meeting up this season. Grove City, 8 straight losses to open things up. Bethany, 7 consecutive losses after topping Alma College in a game in which Bethany's defense had 7 takeaways and a defensive touchdown and only won 23-13. Last season, Bethany beat Grove City 58-26, and that was the Jalen Holmes game. Jalen Holmes ran for 341 yards and 4 touchdowns against Grove City last season.
It's a solid season.
Yeah. That's almost the season he's having this year. Unfortunately, for Jalen Smith, missed a couple of games, but he set the single season and single game record for both Bethany and the PAC last year against Grove City, so they certainly are familiar with him and his work. And for Bethany, losers last week to Thomas More, 30-7. That game, deceptive in the final score. It was close going into the fourth quarter, still 2 possessions, 16-0 going into the fourth. And it's the first team to hold Thomas More under 40 points since the Saints played Carnegie Mellon University down in Crestview Hills to a 20-16 final. Bethany held Thomas More under 500 yards, which is something the Saints haven't done in each of the last 4 weeks. Bethany, 3 takeaways, all fumbles. The Bethany offense took over twice inside Thomas More territory, but then the offense ended up turning it over on downs and fumbling it away. Bethany also, there was another fumble recovered by Bethany and it ended up being a safety after the offense took over deep in its own territory. So offensively, 4 of 16 on third down. Chase Keeneman, 153 yards passing, a touchdown, a pick, 12 rushing attempts, 17 yards. Jalen Holmes, 49 yards rushing, 60 yards receiving, over 100 on the day in terms of total offense. And Donovan Hayden, what a year. 16 tackles, 2 for loss, a forced fumble, a sack, a quarterback hit. The defense, 5 sacks, 3 turnovers, a red zone win with a turnover on downs. However, Thomas Moore, 11 for 17 on third down. I also want to highlight Aaron Fry with 8 tackles, Khalid Pierce with 2 sacks, that is. And Grove City lost at night to Geneva, 21-14. That game was 7-0, 7-7, 14-7, 14-14, 21-14, and then Grove City ran out of time, unfortunately. For the Wolverines, Brett LaFoon, back after missing a couple of games when he was injured against Thomas Moore, threw for 197 yards and 2 touchdowns. However, 3 interceptions in the game. So, Grove City, this might be your best chance, or one of your only final chances to really get things done and get a win this year for Coach DiDonato. And I know for Coach DiDonato, he's found his guys in LaFoon, Wesley Schools, Nick Ponikvar, and it's just getting them experience and putting it together. You would like to see a win this season, and this might be the most even matchup Grove City has all year.
Absolutely. One thing, though, that offense, it's going to have to move the ball a little bit. And, it's really tough. It's a great Thomas Moore team that you played. As we mentioned, one of the best in the country. Only 11 first downs on the afternoon, 242 yards of total offense. They just got to figure out a way to move the ball. That starts with third down conversion. That starts with getting a little bit more out of the running game. As you mentioned Jalen Holmes, only 49 yards. Raekwon Wright, 43 yards. They only had 89 yards of rushing. And they're going to have to figure that part of their game out a little bit against Grove City. As for Grove City, they played tough against a Geneva team that is really had a solid season this year. They were only able to muster up 14 first downs. But here's the thing, is that they only lost by a score to a team that to a Geneva team that only lost to Case Western by 2 earlier this year. And I think that goes to show kind of the parity that we're starting to see in the President's Athletic Conference as a whole. One thing for Geneva, Wesley Schools, not his best performance on the day. Of course, going up against the Geneva defense that's very tough against the run. He had 21 carries for 66 yards. Averaging only 3.1 yards a carry. That's something to keep in mind. And if you're Brett LaFoon, 16 completions and 30 attempts for 197 yards and 2 touchdowns. But one thing to keep in mind is that he does have a tendency to turn the ball over. 3 interceptions against Geneva last week, and you're talking 3 interceptions and you only lose by a score. That could be the difference of the game. And I believe, Andy, you mentioned that one of those interceptions was in the end zone. Mm-hmm. There's a score right there.
He also threw an interception that was called back on a roughing the passer penalty.
Okay.
So there were stretches where they had the ball and first play interception, and however one was called back.
And, if Grove City wants to get that elusive victory, you mentioned, Andy, this is probably the best week to do it. Let's go through some of the offensive stats. Scoring offense, Bethany is 8th, Grove City is 11th. Scoring defense, Grove City is 10th, Bethany is 9th. Total offense, again, they're both down there. Total defense, and they're both down there as well. So, you're really looking at some teams that are 0-6 in the conference, and deservedly so. But big storyline of the game is that one team will win. And so that's a big deal, is that one team will get that first win in conference play. And for Grove City, it could be their first win since, I believe, 2013.
Yep.
So big storyline coming into this game. And I'm not sure. It could be one of those games where, it's a shootout, or it could be one of those low-scoring affairs that these two teams have played quite often throughout the season. So we'll see. I'm very intrigued by this matchup, though.
Numbers for you. Bethany plus 11 in turnover margin. Grove City minus 8. So that's a 19 turnover difference through the season. However, Bethany, best turnover margin in the PAC by 5 turnovers. Still a 1-7 football team. Still with 7 consecutive losses. And I point to third down offense, 29%, second worst in the PAC. Chase Keeneman has been up and down. He's had 3 really solid games against Teal, CMU, and W&J. He's passed for at least 200 yards and at least 3 touchdowns in all 3 of those games. In the other 5 games, 604 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So it's been super Chase Keeneman and then first-year starting quarterback Chase Keeneman as it's going on. And he's shown for the Teal game, he put the team on his shoulders and put over 500 yards of offense and really played well. He's got the ability to do that. And against a Grove City defense, which statistically is very close to the Teal defense in terms of how many yards, how many points does it give up. We could see a lot of points in this game. And for Bethany, defensively, I love their playmakers, Hayden, Fry, Pierce, Gibson. I think they can do a lot of things and make it tough for Brett LaFoon, Wesley Schools, and Nick Ponikvar. And Wesley Schools, a guy who is the 6th leading rusher in the PAC. Nick Ponikvar, a top 6 wide receiver statistically. LaFoon has struggled more than the either two. And we saw this last year at Waynesburg with Jake Doherty making the jump from single A football to D3 football. Now, LaFoon was quad A moving up. I think it's still a big adjustment, and this team has had a hard time protecting him. You're going to have young mistakes with a freshman. You're seeing defenses for the first time. You've had 4 games with multiple interceptions, just 4 touchdown passes since week 1, since he had 3 interceptions. I don't know what to tell you. This process flat out takes time. However, the defense for Grove City isn't at a point where they can just carry a team. It's last in scoring and total defense. 46 points per game, 486 yards allowed per game. But interesting matchup. Bethany, home field advantage, however, in this one, 1:30 kickoff. Between two teams that are really desperate for a win, one team will come away with its first PAC win of the season. But time for our final matchup. This, including our featured team of the week, with a Waynesburg University team that we know quite well here at Waynesburg. 2-6, 2-4 in conference play. St. Vincent 4-4, 2-4 in conference play. Last year, this game, St. Vincent 28-21. The game was tied at 7-14-21. St. Vincent took a 28-21 lead with 5 minutes to play in the third quarter, and then no one scored again. Jake Doherty and Evan Shemensky were your starting quarterbacks, respectively, for Waynesburg and St. Vincent. Shemensky now gone, Doherty hurt, so teams look different under center in Waynesburg. 2 interceptions late in each half, failed in the red zone on a drive in which they started on the St. Vincent 18, so mistakes really plagued the Jackets. St. Vincent off a loss against W&J in which the game was only 27-26 Presidents going into the second half. However, it was all J in the third and fourth quarters. Derek Stewart, first time we've seen like a certifiable monster game against another good team. He threw for a bunch of yards against Case, but also had 3 interceptions. 30 for 47, 418, 4 touchdowns without a pick. He outpassed Pete Coughlin 418 to 189. However, Pete Coughlin's doing the laughing now as the President's one going away. And you saw Damon Black, 111 yards, a touchdown. Ryan Crawford, that is, 101 yards, a touchdown. DJ Ocean Kelly, 127 yards, 2 touchdowns receiving. Shavante Kraft, 50 yards receiving. St. Vincent, a fast start, 2 touchdowns on first 2 drives against W&J. However, the St. Vincent defense couldn't keep Jay out of the end zone the first 3 times the Presidents had the ball. But like the Case Western game, St. Vincent just couldn't keep up. And St. Vincent in the second half, a turnover on downs to start the half on the W&J 22, a 3-and-out, a punt at midfield, a 3-and-out, a fumble. And by then, W&J is 48 points, and that's that. Waynesburg Teal Jackets, a huge game in terms of scoring. A team that had scored only 38 points in the 4 weeks previously. Waynesburg puts up 42 points in the loss to Teal College, 50-42. Tyler Perrone, 401 yards passing, the most for a Yellow Jacket since Carter Hill against Frostburg State, that in 2013. And it was an outstanding performance offensively. I do think Waynesburg left a couple of scores on the field, settling for short field goals and then failing in the red zone late. Turnover on downs, actually an interception on 4th down. So Jackets finally get things going offensively. However, they lose. St. Vincent, losers of 4 straight. What do we see?
You might be looking at a St. Vincent team that is just completely beat down just because of the
I think they're happy to see Waynesburg at this point.
Absolutely. And, we mentioned their tough schedule. That was a storyline when they started off very good. earlier this season. But I mean, it's just been a tough road for them, and sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it. It started with an October 1st game at Case Western. The following week, they had to travel to Westminster. And then they had a bye week, which was a little bit of a reprieve, but not really, because they had to host Thomas More. And then, of course, the next week they hit W&J off of a loss, which is never a good thing.
Coach Ciorini has never lost after a loss in 20 times as the coach of the Presidents in the regular season.
Which is an incredible statistic. But you can imagine St. Vincent is happy to get through that gauntlet and really feel confident about this game going in, and that starts with Derek Stewart. You mentioned some of his numbers: 418 yards, 4 TDs without an interception. What's a little disconcerting to me is the fact that your quarterback plays so well, doesn't turn the ball over, and you still aren't even really close to W&J. That's a little bit of a factor to keep in mind, but the way that Stewart was able to spread the ball, quite incredible. You went over some of the individual stats. That's 3 guys with over 100 yards receiving on the day, and 3 guys scored 4 touchdowns out of the receiver position. So Derek Stewart does a great job of finding new targets, seemingly every pass. But, and as for Waynesburg, it comes down to a role reversal. Throughout the season, we've been talking about, can the offense just do enough to let their defense kind of handle the game and, keep the game close, and then maybe the offense can get something going. But this time, as you mentioned, Andy, it was the offense picking up the defense. The defense struggled to contain Ryan Radke. Different type of quarterback in Derek Stewart, not a guy known for his legs like Ryan Radke, so that's something that may play to their benefit. Derek Stewart is better with his arm, but not to have that dual threat quarterback, something that historically Waynesburg defenses have struggled with, can maybe settle down a little bit. And that St. Vincent likes to throw the ball. So if you can kind of key in on that, if you're Waynesburg's defense, you might be able to slow down the St. Vincent offense. But the defense is looking for a bounce back week after a struggle against Teal. But good for the offense to finally get going. This is going to be an interesting game. I could see this game going either direction, to be honest with you.
Waynesburg-specific storylines, running the football. Jackets got 71 yards out of Ben Serra, 6.5 yards to carry, a couple of touchdowns. He's been a guy who really earned the number 1 back spot after the top 8 rushers from last year all aren't back. And Serra, 1 carry for 3 yards last year. And he comes in, Muskingum, leading rusher in that game, against CMU, fumbles the first time he touches the football, and really he's been in the doghouse since then, or at least he hasn't seen the field since then. And Chad Walker goes down with an injury early against Teal, and Serra comes up, has a big day, a couple of touchdowns. Whitney White, 10 carries, 51 yards, a touchdown. And for Waynesburg, a big theme this season has been struggling in the red zone. They were 6 for 7, 3 rushing touchdowns on the day. I think being able to run the ball certainly helps in that area, and it just helps Perrone be more effective in general. And this receiving group, Tavon Johnson, 94 yards on 8 catches, a touchdown. Touchdown coming on a little pass out into the flat where he was able to run after the catch. Mitch Kendra, 143 yards, the most on the day for any Jacket. A 68-yard catch, the longest from scrimmage. And then Kevin Barnes, 6 catches, 120 yards, and a touchdown. And the defense it looks bad giving up 50 points, but I think the defense made enough plays to stay in the game. It's just Waynesburg's offense in the third and fourth quarters, in the last 25 minutes of this game, only managed 6 points. And in a game in which you score 42 points and led 36-24, I think you look for more out of the offense. So even though you put up 42, I know Coach Shepas thinks that there were points out there, and that's what he reiterated to us when he spoke earlier this week and for the Focus. But Brendan Keany, thank you so much for joining me this week. Thank you at home for joining me this week and all season long. Hard to believe next week is the final week of the regular season, and I'll be talking to Coach Greg Debeljak of Case Western Reserve University, and we'll see if his Spartans are unbeaten when we talk this time next week. Thank you for joining us on PACathletics.org.